Hey friends, I'm Pragmatik and welcome to the final video of Final Fantasy Tactics Month. And what a way to end it than with a full review of the game. I do have to preface this that a lot of my views come directly from the OG source, and while I do love that game, I would probably recommend, if you were able to get your hands on it, to play the War of the Lions remake remaster, as it's got a better translation and a lot of bonus content. But a lot of the review for this game will come from the OG, so I'll probably use original names and all of that. But I've got to say I have to review it because I've wanted to review it for so long, and this game has a serious, special place in my heart. To me, there are a few games more pronounced, refined, and just expertly crafted as Final Fantasy Tactics. This game was, for me, the starting point of seeing video games as a true art form. The characters, development, music, art style, everything to me is just done as perfectly as can be. This is truly when Squaresoft was at its peak, tossing out so many games in the PS1 era, and tackling so many genres and doing so well with each game. It's amazing to me that Tactics really shines the brightest to me, despite what was released so closely to it to be compared to. In Final Fantasy Tactics, you play as Ramza. Well, I guess that's only partly true. While you do control Ramza, you're more so personified as a student or even just a observer to this man, Eraslim Durai, as he recounts the events of the war known as the War of the Lions, and the truth of the Zodiac Brave story in his ancestors' writing known as the Durai Papers, which shed light on Ramza and his involvement in the war. These papers reveal just how significant his involvement was, and paints a completely different story than what most people know. These papers recount Ramza's life as he's just enlisted into the Hokuton Knights. It's at the same time that Ramza enters a very important time in his life, where he comes at the crossroads of doing what he feels is right, and remaining loyal to his family and noble name. Chapter 1 of the game showcases Ramza being exposed to the casualties of war and just how it affects people believed to be lower than his own class. In doing so, Ramza and his best friend Delita are forced to see the effects of warfare, classism, and the powers of people and the corruption of church, and serves as major parts of their development. Ramza loses his way, distancing himself from his family name and even becoming a mercenary, while Delita, in the event of losing his sister, travels down a deep path of revenge, and a goal to disrupt the powers that be, even if it means going against the things he used to believe in. Final Fantasy Tactics does a wonderful job of showcasing just how two people who grew up with similar lives strive towards the same goal, but their ideals change based solely on their perceived class in life. And this affects how they go about the same goal in different ways, further changing the people they used to be. Some for the better, some for the worse. Tactics does a great job in showing this character development in such a short time, with the game only spanning 4 chapters, but expertly telling the stories of these two individuals as they become further entwined in the inner dealings of lords, kings, queens, and the governing religion. What I love about Tactics is how Delita and Ramza both rose to power, but only Delita's records really were recorded, while Ramza pretty much disassembled the entire powers that be. I like that whole sense of you're the only one who knows what actually happened. While I think the story stays strong throughout the whole game, I feel like Chapter 1 has the greatest impact, giving you a fine example of just how desperate the lower class is to not fight in a war, just to survive. And this first-hand experience Delita and Ramza witness really shapes them into who they are, both in the battles they face and the people they meet. Algus, one such companion, really forces them to face their nobility, wanting them to act upon what he believes is the right of nobility, killing anyone lesser in their way. He's an all-out prick, and I usually just beat on him to grind experience points early on in the game. Speaking of experience points, you'll need them to bring out the best of your teammates. Each character has job classes they can achieve by leveling up classes they already are and unlocking new ones. One thing I love about Tactics is that performing any action will give you experience for your level as well as points into your current class, which allows you to lock abilities for that class. It's good to have a variety in your classes, so you can fight both physically and magically. Working on a Thief class will give you a Lancer class, allowing for long-range attacks, And leveling up a wizard class will get you the time mage class, and from there you can get a summoner class. The variety of classes you can obtain makes for a lot of replayability, especially when considering which classes to mix. Some of my personal favorites are the samurai and lancer class. I just like the physical fighters, but I do always make sure to have a backup of magic classes like a time mage. What's even better is that every class can have a subclass, so you can have a samurai that can use geomancy, or a wizard that can use monk abilities, which is wild to think about. But it's possible, and it's this addition to abilities that further expands the combination you can use. If you want to just win at everything, then get yourself a dancer, as I feel like they are the most broken class, literally being able to perform their abilities at all times and don't have to actually do any fighting. What's more, their dances affect every enemy on the field. If you're curious, I did rank every class in the original Final Fantasy Tactics in a different video. I'll leave a tag up there for you in case you want to check it out. Combat is pretty straightforward, with your moves showing you where they take effect and different classes giving you varied movement. And there's no shortage of ways to grind. You can perform random encounter battles to help you level up, as well as send your party members into proposition quests to get more job points, as well as money for your services. This method always leads to your character saying stuff like, "This is the way," and "I had a good feeling," when they report their proposition. Even though it's time consuming and potentially dangerous to send out a handful of your own allies, I can't resist trying to do all the propositions I can and get all the extra little treasures. This all gets added into your overall lore of Ivalice and those who inhabit it, which this game is packed with. So if you love world building, then this is the game for you. Random encounters are a great way to raise your levels and work on your classes, but I will say one issue with fighting at random is sometimes the encounters you face can be absolutely overwhelming. One prime example of this is fighting any more than one chocobo of any color at any given time. There are some tough monsters in the wild, but chocobos are the absolute bastards of this game. Their mixed ability to run far across the map, heal themselves and others, and the other colors being able to chuck meteors at you can really make for a bad time if the game decides to give you a bunch of these jerks to fight at once. And remember, this game does feature permadeath, so make sure you're stocked up on ways to revive your teammates before taking on chocobos. I love chocobos, but not in Tactics. But grinding is important because the story battles can be even worse. One thing I love about Tactics is how the cutscenes play out. That sprite work is some of the best I've ever seen, and really remains some of the best work I know of to date. One thing that got me hooked on Tactics was just how elaborate the game's cutscenes are. There is so much detail crafted into them and the animations that play out. This scene in particular I really enjoy. I just really enjoy all the little details that happen in such a small amount of time, to the flow of their capes, to how their sword drops right as he's impaled, and the slump of his body is accompanied with a heavy sound. It's all so good, and it's pretty present throughout the entire game. It makes me really appreciate how meticulous some of the old games were done. I really love the avatars too. All their expressions make them look sleepy, and I just like that. The scenery and backgrounds are also beautifully done too, and no stage really feels like another, which is great because there are a lot of elements at play in each level. If water in stages are too deep to pass through, if a platform is too high or low, elevation itself can play a big factor in terms of hitting your enemies, so once again the classes you choose play a big part in how to go about planning your battles. This demand for strategy should be the norm for games like this, and I feel many games have aspired to be like Tactics. The recently released Triangle Strategy is a good example, but even with how much I like that game, I still feel it doesn't compare to Final Fantasy Tactics. While Tactics does remain one of my favorite games of all time, it does come with its own issues. Some minor, and some almost game-breaking. As much as I praise this game for its characters and their development, I feel that the development stays pretty exclusive to Ramza and Delita, and the important characters you do get throughout the chapters are only kind of locked to their respective chapters. While they do engage in dialogue in between fights, they only sort of do so when they are involved in the issues. Once you pass their involvement in the story, they just kind of become blank slates. It does suck to see them kind of fall out of the overall involvement of the game at a certain time. This is slightly rectified in War of the Lions, with the characters getting new cutscenes that give the special characters some more involvement. I know Agrius in general is a fan favorite, so it's good to see her get more screen time with other characters in the PSP remake. I just wish that could have happened in the original as well. And if you played the original a lot like me, it'll become more than apparent that some of the translation can get a little sloppy. There's a ton of dialogue in this game, so translation errors can happen, but there are quite a few examples of dialogue being a little off to borderline not making sense at all. Once again, this is also worked on in War of the Lions, but even then, I think some of the liberties taken in that translation is a little odd. I recommend you play both and judge for yourself. The much bigger problem is that when I said grinding is important, I meant it. You see, later on you'll get into these battles that are kind of episodic. Finishing a fight will prompt you to save your game and then immediately throw you into the next fight. While this isn't much of a problem, there is one particular fight that puts you in a one-on-one fight with a powerful enemy, and if you're not a high enough level or even a good class, you may not be able to beat the enemy, essentially soft-locking you out of your own playthrough. Add on to that, this is pretty late in the game, so if you're not prepared, you could lose quite a bit of time. I may have switched my class to Samurai the moment I got it when I first played Final Fantasy Tactics, and I definitely had to restart the entire game, but it goes without saying that the good more than outweighs the bad. The battles are enjoyable, which is surprising to say given how long some of them can take. I'd say I've probably beaten this game about 10 times, and for some reason the game just never gets old to me. It probably helps to try and use different classes each time, and challenging yourself in different ways. And something else that never gets old is the music of Final Fantasy Tactics. I'm always one to point out good music in games, but the Tactics OST will forever go down as one of the best OSTs of all time, in my opinion, and for great reason. Let's think of some of the numbered Final Fantasy games. Most of them are loaded with good songs, but think of the battle themes. How many do you typically hear? You've got your regular battle theme followed up with the occasional boss battle theme, and then the really epic final boss theme. Well, for Final Fantasy Tactics, there are a variety of random encounter themes, but for nearly every significant battle theme, there is a whole new theme dedicated to the fight. A good example of this is Battle Under the Stars, when you fight against Isliud. Or the Battle on the Bridge theme. This soundtrack has some of the best battle themes as well as character themes I've ever heard, and I don't think it'll ever truly be topped. But one thing I never talk about in reviews, but I feel I have to talk about in this one, is the sound effects. This game is truly packed with a ton of sound effects. Nearly any move and action is accompanied with its own sound. And there are just so many cool ones, like the sound when you cast a summon. And even the death screams are memorable. There's even little nuances like when a dancer performs a slow dance and it's just the random encounter theme slowed down. And that's just so cool and genius to me. I don't think any other game has ever put that much thought into sound design, especially not a game as old as this one. It's rare to appreciate sound effects as much as you'd appreciate a soundtrack, but for Final Fantasy Tactics, to me, they both work together to make the game feel alive. But to me, that's just how all of Final Fantasy Tactics is. Everything about it is a well-constructed masterpiece, and I feel it is the way it is because it was a love project. Yasumi Matsuno, the director of Final Fantasy Tactics, was praised for his work on Ogre Battle, and Square knew that he'd make something wonderful with Tactics. And they were right. Add on to the artistic stylings of Akihiko Yoshida, and composition by both Masaharu Iwata and Hitoshi Sakimoto, and you're given one of the most legendary works of our time. It truly felt like a piece that every person in the team wanted to give their all to. Absolutely nothing feels lifeless in this game. Every character has their own look. There's a different design for every class. The animations to the sprites look fresh and vibrant. Sound design made every action you took feel alive, accompanied with powerful orchestral scores that made every fight you entered feel important, because they were. Every story mission is its own telling, whether it be to further expand Rem's development or even to flesh out the world of Ivalice. showcasing what characters are fighting for, and even some of the dialogue is the most quotable out there. Thunder God Sid in particular being an iconic character all on his own, and also another character to have if you want to win every fight. The story characters you meet along the way carry just as much importance and heart as the main characters, packed with their own unique class jobs and abilities that you'll just want to explore and master. Maybe except Rafa and Merrick, their abilities kind of suck, but their stories do not. Each and every character plays well into the overall story. You'll most likely find a character that you love more than any other, and it will probably be Agrius. It's just a shame they don't get the same development as the main characters. If there is ever one game you owe it to yourself to play and get lost in, it's Final Fantasy Tactics, whether it be the original PS1 version, PSP version, or even the mobile version. Find a way to play this game. It's worth every minute of it. And I'll argue this to death. Maybe one day we'll get that fabled remaster of this game, but until then, I implore you to find a way to play this game. Final Fantasy Tactics will forever be in my top 10 video games of all time. In terms of RPGs, no greater game has come before it, and only so many games have come close to matching its quality. I hope developers aspire to reach the quality that this 25-year-old game has achieved. Thank you so much for listening to me gush about one of my favorite games of all time. Seriously, if you haven't played this game, pick it up, play it, and let me know what you think. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you're new. Have a great day, and keep it practical.